Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Jelcar. Let's see, the seating of alternates. I'm here, Jackie. And so, Representative Grassi, you should sit in for Representative Schmidt. And we've got Tim.
Peter's gonna be here in about 15 minutes.
Oh, well, that's fine. In this, all right, well, there's a senator or two we could fill in for. All right, we do have a quorum, so the minutes of the previous meeting.
Move to adopt as written and presented.
Any comments, corrections, additions, or deletions to the minutes? Okay, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Madam Chair,
yes.
I wanted to note that our transcriptionist is not here today, our court reporter. So it would be important for everyone to state their motions clearly and so we know who did it. And I would also ask for the audience, if you come up to the table, whether or not you testify, please fill out a pink card.
That way we won't have to guess at how to spell your name.
Yes, Peter.
Yes, good morning, Representative Schmidt. Representative Grassi, you're in for Senator Whitley then. Okay. Does anyone have something to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, in that case,
Madam
Do it.
Chair, I move the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
second by Representative Lynn. Any discussion? Those in favor? Opposed? All right, very good. On to the regular agenda.
So the first item on the regular agenda is 2023-97 from the Real Estate Appraiser Board. This particular proposal does have a number of issues. The board has been communicating with our office about addressing these issues, but unfortunately, we've not been able to resolve all of them. The first being that there are some sections of this proposal that have been expired since February of 2023. So the committee may have questions of whether the board has been enforcing the rules in violation of 541A22. There's also an unclear comment on page 1 of the rule text. The rule cites to the fee in the federal statute, but the federal statute says that the required fee be no more than $40. It does not specify that it is $40, so that is a little unclear of whether or not the board is actually charging $40 or something less than that. Also on page 1, the rule states that an application will not be accepted if it's not accompanied by the payment of the application fee, but it's unclear whether the board is referring to just the application fee in the PLC rule or if that also includes that federally required registration fee. Also on page 1, there's another unclear. In section 301.02 is formatted as a list, as the section includes introductory language. But as you go through the paragraphs, some of them are standalone paragraphs, some of them are part of the list, so it's clear as written. Again on page 1 and again on page 15, there's an unclear because of the way the rule is written. We've been seeing this a lot lately where it's written as an indirect requirement, meaning that when you read it, it's as though the application has to provide information and not the applicant has to provide information. So that has to be rewritten to clearly say it's the applicant's responsibility to provide that information. Also on page 1, there's an unclear because there's a discrepancy between the rule text and the form that was submitted. The form has requirements that are not in the rule text. On page 3, and once again on page 15, there's an unclear because there's a form that's titled experience log, but the requirements on that form are not in the rule text. So once again, we have a discrepancy there. On page 4, there's another unclear, which also appears on page 5. Once again, just not being clear as written. The rule text uses the word information, but really it should be referring to the application. On page 4, this one might need a legislative fix. So there's a legislative intent authority unclear comment because the board is requiring appraisal management companies to stipulate and agree that whether it's a New Hampshire court or New Hampshire agency, service may be made on the executive director of OPLC. But the statute itself says that the service of process may be made on the Secretary of State. So there seems to be a discrepancy on that, as the statute seems pretty clear, but logistically wise, it sounds as though having it served on the executive director may be the better option. So that would need a legislative fix if that's going to continue moving forward. I have quite a few more comments that I can continue going through, or
I think might be, this may be enough for us to deal with it one time.
yeah. So at this point, because of the number of issues, I would just recommend the committee consider a preliminary objection at this point, so that the board can address it in a preliminary objection response. And like I said, the expiration in this legislative intent comment would be something that needs to be addressed outside of that.
Was it?
You want to move immediately to that?
Let's
Hear from them?
hear from the agency on the,
I did.
on the fee question and the legislative intent question. At
Good
least,
morning. Tina Kelly, Office of Professional Licensure and Certification. I'm the rules coordinator. And on the fees, we're simply, what I found out was it is in OPLC's fee structure already. So we're simply going to point there for that.
and it is probably $40 exactly.
I believe that's what it is.
That's okay.
And on the second one, the legislative intent, I talked to PLC's counsel, and it does make more sense to have it delivered to the executive director rather than the Secretary of State's office, because the Secretary of State's office is just going to send it to us. And it's on a list for future legislative correction.
Okay. And about the expired rules?
That I don't have the answer to that yet, because I was going to address everything at once. These are all things that we can fix, and we need to do more research on that, but I can bring it back. If you were to do a preliminary rejection, I could bring it back and give you that information.
Okay.
I just have one question.
Yes.
So again, it's about the legislative intent language. As long as the law says Secretary of State, shouldn't the rules say Secretary of State, even though it makes more sense to go to the executive director, but my understanding from the conversation is the language in the exact law says Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Lindsay Courtney, Executive Director, OPLC. I would agree with that, Centerling. I think the challenge is the Real Estate Appraisers Board used to be administratively attached to the Secretary of State. So I think this falls in the bucket of the cleanup language. I think if you get behind the plain language, which there's a question of whether we could, I think the intent is to have the executive director or the executive official be the responsible party for service of process, which used to be the Secretary of State and is now the office. I can't recall whether it's slated in that cleanup language that we've been working on this session, and we can certainly look into that when we come back. But I think that is kind of how we got here, which is they used to be administratively attached to
I'm
the
just
Secretary
more
of State.
concerned about the fact that someone may challenge improper service because the law says where it's supposed to go and it wasn't done that way if we put it in the rule, and then we might lose something because
Yes.
we did something correctly.
I think that we will make a note of that and have them respond to the objection response. And if the statute is not slated for immediate cleanup, and I know there's a bunch of them, we've got them in my committee, we will expect the rule to be changed back to Secretary of State. Would
I
that be
agree, that makes
agreeable?
sense. Yes.
Okay, Representative Lynn.
You know, I just have a question. I mean, with regard to the Secretary of State, I'm just curious, I wonder if it might make sense to leave it as Secretary of State just because, do we know, like what other, where you have other situations of an out-of-state licensee for other agencies or whatever, do we know whether that says the Secretary of State or not? And number one, and number two, would it make sense to just have, for everybody that's designating somebody to be their agent, they're out of state, just have one person, the Secretary of State, be that person?
Thank you, Representative Lynn. I think that's a fantastic question and one that we've been grappling with because, as you know, if you have an entity, a corporation already registered with the Secretary of State, obviously there are ways to affect service of process by registering your business with the Secretary of State. That said, there are a number of boards in our technical professions that do have the statutory language that require in particular, businesses that are registered or licensed by the office to also designate the executive director as the person to receive for service of process. I don't know from a policy standpoint whether that makes sense for the reasons you mentioned. It may make sense for an individual license, but certainly not sure if it makes sense from an entity who's already registered to do business with the Secretary of State and there's already that duplicative process. So that's something we can certainly consider and put into the board's response.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Have we covered all the points?
The remaining comments that I have are pretty much all unclear comments, whether it's discrepancies between the rule text in the forms or unclear as written or unclear citations, which all could be easily addressed in a preliminary objection response.
Okay, does someone wish to make a preliminary
make that
objection?
motion.
Second?
Okay, moved by Representative Schmidt, seconded by Senator Lang. Any discussion? All right, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. We will expect a response at the appropriate time. And specifically what you've been doing with the expired rules. All right. Natural scientists.
Okay, this is for Soil 300. They contain the certification requirements, and the rules set up application requirements and other requirements for the certification of soil and wetland scientist. The board has filed an amended conditional approval, which is online. You should be able to pull that up. And I'll be referring to that for the few issues that remain. A couple of minor issues is that on page 19 of the PDF there's a web link. One of the last ones in the appendix doesn't work, and that is easily fixable today. It can be addressed orally. Then on the bottom of the first page, you'll see an informational note just informing the committee that this board still has some fee authority in its statute. But since there's a lot of cleanup going on this session, you might already be aware of that. Finally, there's an issue around the collection of fees during the time period of the rule's expiration in violation of 541A22's prohibition on the enforcement of an expired rule for any purpose. And you'll see that on page, I believe it's a little further down, Soil 301.03, it had the application fees. And like I said, these rules expired in March 11th, 2019. The rules now cite to the new fees that are in the PLC 1002s, and those are effective as of August 1st of last year. So there's this gap of unenforceability of the application fees between those two dates. The committee has encountered this situation before with some of the other boards in recent years and has at times requested reports and on the number of impacted licensees and whether or not refunds have been made, that sort of thing, as an example of, doing that as part of the conditional approval. But that's up to the committee's discretion. Rakia Medley is here today. She is general counsel for the boards. And I thought she was going to be speaking. I don't see her now, but Lindsay Courtney's also here as well. But those are the only issues that remain with the proposal.
Okay,
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Lindsay Courtney, Executive Director, OPLC. I'm going to address the fee issue, and then I'll defer to Attorney Medley to address any other issues with respect to the board's rules. So, and I think my statements probably apply to the next rules package with respect to engineers. So, upon learning of potential issues and enforcing expired fee rules, I did look into the matter to determine root cause. It appears that there were errors in reading the source notes. And so that it was not clear, immediately apparent that there were expired fee rules, which resulted in us continuing to assess fees at licensure and initial licensure and renewal. We have since instituted remedies to address this issue, which basically stem from a lack of internal controls, which I think the committee is aware of, that we've been working on since 2019. At least I've been working on since 2019. So a couple of things that we've done is, first, PLC 1002s, we established those back in August. Once the office did receive, or it was clear that the office had statutory authority to adopt rules regarding fees. So I think that moving forward, we should see that with respect to fees, those issues have been solved. But as to the internal controls issues regarding expiration of rules, what we've also done is we have a policy and procedure now, setting forth a specific time frame in which rules need to be reviewed, notified, the relevant parties need to be notified. We have a monthly rulemaking committee that we review potential expiring rules. We notify the boards. We review rulemaking committee requests for additional rulemaking support. And then separately, we've purchased some software that will essentially take the human out of the analysis in terms of when rules expire. We should go live on that next month. And so I think that going forward, we won't see, hopefully, we won't see any issues with respect to expired rules, at least as it relates to fees. And the board could choose to allow a rule to expire purposely. So in terms of refunds, I think the committee is probably aware that historically we have issued refunds in the past if we have improperly assessed a fee based on a rule that was expired. I've gone back and I've taken a look. We've definitely done refunds on pharmacy. We've done refunds most recently when we did the emergency rule for COAs and engineers. But I don't think we've ever gone back into a prior fiscal year, and certainly never gone back into a biennium. And I think that we need to do the right thing. And speaking with DOJ, I'm not sure that taking money from today's licensees and refunding it to licensees from 2019, 2020 who received the benefit of the bargain is necessarily the right thing to do. So their advice is to the extent that we need to do refunds, we could do refunds from July 1 of this fiscal year to August 1 when we didn't have rules in place this fiscal year, but to not go back into a prior biennium. Happy to take any questions.
Representative Baroda?
Yes, and I guess I have because this has come up with me in previous discussions when we collected money for something, let's say a license, but somebody gets the license. And yes, the rule has expired, but then if we give back the money, do we not retrieve back the license? Because it is so I think that Director Courtney has a point, and if somebody gets that service, even though the rule has expired, I could understand the difficulty in having the rule expire and not carrying out the rule. And therefore, if we do that, then that benefit should be removed as well. I think that in all fairness, that's what people pay the license or the application fee for.
And of course, a license granted in 2019 would have expired in 2021. So
just want to reiterate that we take this issue very seriously. I was dreading coming here to talk to you today as much as I love appearing before legislative committees, because this should never happen, ever. And I think we've done what we need to do to institute internal controls, but we're still cleaning up. We're still cleaning up issues that have existed for a long time.
Senator?
I just have one question on page 14 where you have that section 2 at the top of the page. It actually says $200 fee, but then it also refers to the fee schedule. I'm a little just nervous that they might get out of sync and whether it makes sense to strike the $200 and just say upon payment of fee as described in the fee schedule and strike the $200 so we don't have an issue where potentially we get two rules out of sync. Whether that would be an acceptable edit. So page 14 on a revised conditional approval, 30303A number 2.
Yes, I completely agree with that. We should be referring to the PLC 1002s because that's how we'll get into issues moving forward. We can make that change.
Anyone else?
Conditional approval? The edits
Well,
would-
we already, this is already a revised conditional approval request.
Final approval with the edits as requested.
Chair, it's actually an amended conditional approval. But yes, they can make these changes orally. They can agree to these today. And like I said at the outset, that web link on page 19 doesn't work. And so that can be part of the conditional approval today.
Okay, so Senator Lang moves conditional approval of the amended conditional approval request with those two extra changes. Is that correct? Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Senator Ennis. Do have a question before. Director Courtney, you said you have a new software package to keep track of your rules. Is that in sync with the new software package the Administrative Rules Department is working on and hoping to generally provide that data?
So it certainly it's not something we've talked about interfacing. Currently, our software is already used by the Department of Education. My understanding is it basically captures information that's on the GenCourt website, basically trolls that information and puts it into the system, which we use for tracking and internal reporting. And it also contains templates that are the templates that are contained in the draft manual to make sure that we limit any errors in drafting. But I'm certainly happy to talk to Attorney Morrell about it, to make sure that we're not.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That would help. We
and-
don't need more incompatible software systems.
Agreed.
Our updates are actually being all done in-house with our own IT people. So
Okay.
we're not contracting software out, but eventually it will have those capabilities.
All right, thank you. We have a motion for a conditional approval. Is that any further discussion?
I think the colloquy we've had is good.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you very much.
Okay, so the next one, 2023-167, Engineering 300. These rules set up application and other requirements for the licensing of engineers. The board has late filed an amended conditional approval request, and the committee will need to vote to accept that late filed item since there wasn't a waiver with that. We could do that now, or we can do that towards the end.
Let's vote on whether to accept it so we know what we're talking about. So I move that we accept the late filed conditional approval request.
Second.
Discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we will deal with that.
There are just a few issues that remain with the proposal, and I'll just take the minor ones first. On page 1 of the amended conditional approval packet, there's an informational note, again, that this board still has some fee authority in its statute, but that's probably going to be fixed during the session's cleanup. Next, on page 8, there's a comment that was made. The the last time the rules went through, and that was back in 2013. And that there might be some need to clarify in the statute that the third-party testing company develops the exam rather than having that duty be on the board. It kind of comes down to an issue of how to interpret that statute's language. But like I said, this issue was raised before, and the rules were approved despite the concern. The final issue is
Well, I'd like to comment on that.
Of course.
The professional engineer testing is standardized nationwide, and we certainly don't want our board creating its own test. So I'm pretty sure that would have been the intent of the legislature, because it's been that way at least for 50 years. So I think we can be fairly confident the legislative intent is to use the national type exam. Director Morrow?
Historically, this has been an issue where statutes were fairly old regarding any given board. It often required them to create an exam. Over time, though, national exams came about. Everybody, they're standardized. Everybody wanted to use them. I know a number of agencies have over the years used corrective legislation to do that, but this one I think is a closer call. And I understand your point too.
So, fine, we'll add it to the list of things that could be cleaned up.
Okay, the final issue to discuss is around the collection of fees during the time period of the rule's expiration, just like the last proposal. If you look at page 13 of the amended conditional approval packet, you'll see a copy of the ENG 302.03 rule. It shows that only the first two, it shows that only 2 paragraphs are currently effective, that the rest of that section expired in 2020. And the fees, as we were talking about earlier, they're now in the 1002s in the PLC rules. And that rule was effective last August. So there's that gap again between January 1st of 2020 and then August 1st of 2023, in which there were no fee rules. On the next page of that packet, on page 14, you'll see a copy of a standing order that the board issued citing the expired rules. At the time the board issued this standing order, only those 2 paragraphs were effective, and that was the fee for certification as a trainee and the fee for examinations. But the standing order is really about bounce checks. So it's kind of in a roundabout way, I guess you could say, enforcing the rules. It makes it clear that bouncing a check or not paying for it is a disciplinary violation. So presumably the board was collecting fees on the expired rule, but just like you heard on the last proposal, there have been a lot of things implemented to try to prevent this from happening again. But these were the only comments that I had on the proposal.
Thank you again. Lindsay Courtney, Executive Director, OPLC. So my comments with respect to the fees are the same with respect to soil scientists. I don't believe the board has ever disciplined anybody on a returns check. That's not an issue we have with the Board of Engineers. There are other boards where that's an issue, but I don't think that's an issue with them, and I don't think they've ever been subjected to discipline.
What
Ricky,
about all the other fees that are listed there, including the licensure as a professional engineer?
So again, I think, those certainly were collected going back to 2020. I think my comments are essentially the same. It was an error in reading the source notes. I think at some point years ago, the rules were valid only for 8 years and then we switched to 10 years and certain portions of the rule were on the 10-year track. And so it wasn't clear. It wasn't immediately apparent to somebody who's not used to reading source notes when that portion of the rule expired.
Any other comments,
Well,
questions, Representative Lang?
Well, again, I'm looking at the 3024, it has a list of all those fees and license fees. Is that expired and not being implemented because it's in PLC 1002, whatever it is? So on page 13, a list of all those fees are now going to, is that going in the rule? I'm trying to understand what those, and we're not going to.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it. Is that section essentially being deleted with a reference to,
Is that what
Yes,
like,
that's correct.
Trying to
Yes.
understand why.
Yes.
I'm fine then.
all right?
To approve?
Senator Lang moves to approve. Is there a second?
Yes.
Sent by Representative Schmidt. Any further discussion? Comments, concerns? Seeing none, the Representative Schmidt.
So it does seem that you are working out some kind of a process here, but it seems a little bit kind of like oral rulemaking almost, which we don't like. So I'm wondering, is there some alternative to just kind of like making do that would be better, clearer, and so forth for the public and for practitioners?
So I think there are really two options here. I think their fees were improperly collected, which we acknowledge. The question is whether or not we should be essentially refunding those fees and or asking for the licenses back for the work that they've done. I don't think that's the best solution. And again, this obviously should not happen, but I think moving forward, we need to have a solution in place, which we do. But I'm not sure that we can really completely rectify the issue in the past, other than to apologize, which I'm sorry.
I'm more concerned with the, putting out a standing order than the fact that the fees were collected carrying on, but putting out a standing order saying we've got the authority to assess fees and essentially saying proceed against someone who puts out a bad check.
Yeah, I think we asked all of our boards to do a standing order and we gave them the templated language because particularly with certain boards, there were many issues with return checks. And as you may know, when there's a return check, the state incurs a fee on that. Again, I don't think, and I can confirm, but I don't think engineers were ever disciplined with respect to this issue. And I think this goes back to, it wasn't immediately apparent to the board and to the person assisting them with the standing order that the rules were actually expired at the time that the standing order was issued.
I see. Thank you.
Well, I'm more concerned about rectifying the situation. We can't go back and undo the past, obviously, and we're kind of, rolling along on flat tires. But is there a better procedure or something that is at least better for the ongoing? I'm not so concerned about undoing the past. Okay.
I think that the solution really was ensuring that OPLC has the authority to set fees so that we're not going into 50-something different rule sets to pull out the fees in multiple different locations. So you've accomplished that. We've accomplished that. We have some fees in place and we are statutorily required to do an assessment and a review periodically. We're undertaking that now. We likely will be proposing some additional fee adjustments, which will result in additional filing, which will result in an additional 10 years. And so I don't see this issue happening again because all of the fees have been consolidated in the 1002s.
Okay, as long as we're proceeding on an orderly basis from here on in, I'm more comfortable with that. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you very much, and we're looking forward to that report.
Yes.
All right. Safety.
Okay, so 174 registration hearings. So you'll see that that there's a legislative intent comment on this one around the last section. let me see here, on the final proposal, that would be page 3, or actually page 7 of the FP packet. However, that comment is actually resolved because this was something that I missed, that rule has been extended by 541A14. And it's kind of funny because I've caught this a lot lately on other proposals, but completely missed this one. So those rules have been extended because they were filed prior to their expiration back in August. So I have no other issues with this proposal.
Excellent. Any questions? Motion?
Move to approve.
Second by Senator Ennis, moved by Senator Lang. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. The next two are not ready, and we'd like to postpone them to the April meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Chair, before you vote on that, 184 will need a waiver for jail car because our April meeting isn't until the 19th and our deadline was the 15th. So we'll also just need a vote on that.
I'll add the waiver in my motion.
Yes, we will request to postpone the two of them with a waiver on 184. All right.
Second.
It's already been seconded, I believe.
Okay. All right.
Discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we will see you next month. All right, back to the Board of Accountancy.
So this one actually just needs an oral conditional approval because the issues are that it states Board of Septic System Evaluators instead of Board of Accountancy in AC 201.01. And the other issue was that it mentions petitions for waiver of rule, which is the very next section. So that could be deleted, but those are the only two issues. And if the board is willing to take a oral conditional approval, we can just do that.
It looks as though this rule essentially is repealing vast quantities of rule. Is that correct?
Yes, it repeals all the AC rule 200 rules and cites to the PLC 200 rules. It's
Okay.
like many of the boards are consolidating to cite to PLC.
All right, I see your point.
Move to conditionally approve with the edits according.
Any discussion? Anything important to add?
Nothing at this time.
All right. And just questions, comments? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you very much.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I missed who the second was on that.
it's Representative Grassick. Okay, oh, I'm sorry, and we missed postponing the licensure and disciplinary sections.
Correct. This next one, 2023-276 needs to be postponed and no waiver is needed for it.
Move to postpone and grant waiver.
No waiver.
You said no waiver was needed? All right, so move to postpone.
Second.
Okay, seconded by,
Lynn beat
by
me by a
Representative
mile,
Lynn.
Mike.
All right. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Registration of nurse agencies.
So for this one, the only issue is that the rules state a fee that is not delineated in PLC 1002. And there doesn't appear to be rulemaking at this point to add that fee to 1002. So it's a little bit of a difficult situation because the board needs to cite to fee in PLC 1002, but it's not in 1002, and that's the OPLC that needs to fix that. So it's kind of like a situation where this rule isn't really where it needs to be fixed.
Is this, is this the comment on page 3?
It's on page 7.
7, okay, because on page 3, it specifically says that if there's nothing in PLC 1002, no fee. I think is a nice general statement. And then 7, it's, well, same thing there. They say if there's no fee listed in the other rule, we won't charge you.
So C2 kind of covers it, but if it's not in there until we add it, there's no fee for this, like,
That's correct.
I'm okay with that.
Perfectly okay with that myself. All right, any other comments,
Mo-
concerns? Motion,
Move to approve?
Second.
moved by Senator Lang, second by Representative Lynn. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? And I'd like to comment that there's a very, very nice statement of responses to comments that is included in this packet, and I'm glad to see it. And what else?
Expedited revision to.
Okay.
So this is the expedited revision to forms 2024-2. It's Bureau of Credentialing for Educator forms, and there are actually 20 forms in this this proposal, and there are a handful that have some issues. For example, there's a title that is different in the rule text and the form. There are 3 that that refer to the school year 2023-2024, which means it would need to be editorially changed every year. And there's a couple that have requirements that are not in the rule, and a certification that is not in the rule. So after discussing with the agency, we'd discuss getting a preliminary objection, just because unfortunately in this process at the moment, we don't have a CA conditional approval process. So you have to do a preliminary objection to get those revisions done. And so I think that's what we had talked about before. That process is coming in legislation, but it's just not here yet. So.
Okay, any comments?
Julie Shea, Administrative Rules Coordinator, Department of Ed.
I'm Susan Blake, Administrator for the Bureau of Credentialing, Department of Ed.
So how do you feel about the suggested procedure?
So the first suggestion that was put to us was the on DOE BOC 2, the application for licensure. We'd be happy to change the rule to reflect the recommendation of the name change on the form. On DOE.
Ma'am?
Sorry.
So I think the question is, I think we all agree, we know what the issues are. I think the question is, are you okay with the process that we preliminary object to give you time to make the corrections necessary and then bring it back so we can approve it?
Yes, that's fine. So sorry.
Okay, Senator Lang,
Move to preliminary object.
Second.
moved by Senator Lang, seconded by Representative Schmidt. Any discussion? All right, those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? All right, thank you very much. God, we're really rolling.
Damn,
It's-
get to this
We do
finance
not
with
yet
this
have the
one.
watercraft safety rules.
That's correct. And it's not due till April 1st, so that one's still fine.
Any other business?
We do have an emergency rule.
Okay,
With the chair's permission, I think it would be good to have the agency go first to explain why they're doing the emergency rule.
Good morning. I didn't know I was the agency. Good morning. I'm Helen Hanks. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Corrections, but I am a member of the Opioid Abatement Commission. And the commission at the last meeting asked if a member could come and join our stewards from HHS to talk about the emergency rule. The emergency rule is before you because the commission has really found after its lengthy work since implementation of the trust fund, that we need to make some adjustments as a state to recognize that both locally at the county level and even at the state level, there are opportunities to be more nimble, to get the opioid trust fund dollars out swiftly, to abate the effect of opioids in our communities. And that's what this rule is attempting to do. I can get into some specific details if the committee has questions on those.
Other questions? I'm glad to see that you're intending to enter into regular rulemaking to confirm this. Any other comments?
I am not prepared to argue that there is no basis for emergency rule. I think arguably that there is a basis. However, the rule itself and the cover sheet for the emergency rule raise a number of questions. I can give those to the department, and I think for the most part they can be addressed during the regular rulemaking process, which will be necessary.
Okay.
I-
Excellent. That is where that sort of concerns should be addressed.
Yeah, there were a couple of things though. If you see on the first page of the emergency rule in 03F, the definition of eligible entity is being changed, and it seems to be taking out government agencies. But it's my understanding that the purpose of the emergency rule is to put in a couple of government agencies. So I wasn't sure why they're changing the definition of eligible entity. And the other major concern, I think, is that the current process for doing this is in 1,205, which is not part of the emergency rule. And that requires getting an RFP and other steps. I think the idea with the emergency rule is to do an abbreviated process for these two entities. However, that means that you're going to have two separate processes in the rule, which may make a clarity issue, but perhaps they can amend 1,205 or the emergency, the language of 1,204 to address this.
You give us some information on that?
Good morning, Allison Radmay. I'm the administrator for the Rules Unit at the Department of Health and Human Services. With respect to the comments that Attorney Morrell had just made, it has, after reading this and it being pointed out, that in the regular rulemaking process, we will be changing F back to read how it originally states. And I apologize, we don't have 1,205 in front of us to review and respond to that at this time. But again, any comments we receive will be addressed in the regular rulemaking process, which we plan to begin quite shortly.
So would it be fair to say that the process in 1,205 is intended to be followed for these additional grants?
Hold on, please. Sorry.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I no, the new entities would not follow the process in 1,205. The cover sheet explains that would take too long to get this implement the use of the funds by these two entities, so they're creating this exception.
See.
So-
So I think that when you enter into regular rulemaking, you should, in fact, include that section on the process to indicate, so that at least you're keeping together the process rules. Any other comments, questions? Okay, we don't have to do anything on emergency rules, but we will see what comes out of the regular rule.
Thank
We
you.
don't need
We don't have to approve an
No,
emergency.
I'm sorry.
We
I'm
can
moving- I'm
object
moving
to it.
I'm moving to the next item.
Ah.
We don't need a middle meeting, right? We don't need we can
No,
waive the-
no, I think we will, by consensus, cancel the continued meeting and plan to meet at our regular scheduled meeting on April 19th. Okay? In that case, if there's any other business? Yes, we are adjourned.
Did you have this?